Alright everyone, so today I wanted to share with you guys 10 Void Rares that you might want to consider 6-starring and taking to level 60. This is going to be my list right here, so yours might be a little bit different, or you might see some champions that you might think are good that are not in this list. I will also say for this list I decided to do it in reverse order, so I'm going to start off with some Void Rares that you might not actually think are that great, that are kind of some hidden gems out there, and of course we'll end off the list with some of the best known Void Rare champions in the game. With that all being said, let's go ahead and start off with number 1, and we are actually going to head to the Undead Hordes for this one right here. And I'm going to talk about Doomscreech. Probably not really a champion that you hear too much about, but in all honesty, for a Void Rare, just for any rare champion, he's actually not that bad. He has a fairly decent skill kit, and he has one skill in particular that is very strong. Definitely going to be a decent champion to consider worth taking to level 60, especially if you don't have any similar champions. His first skill is auto attack, attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 25% chance, which of course you can buff with skill books up to 40%, of placing a 50% decrease accuracy debuff for 2 turns. So a fairly decent auto attack right there. You have the decreased accuracy tacked on top of it, so a little bit extra besides just the regular damage that you get with it. It also scales both on attack and HP as well, so that's definitely something worth considering right there. Now his second skill is very strong, especially for a rare champion. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 30%, places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. And of course you can lower this down from a 5-turn to a 3-turn cooldown. So that alone is an incredibly powerful skill, especially to have that on a rare champion. Very strong. So this skill alone is going to make worth considering this champion taking to level 60 alone. On top of that, you have a decent auto attack, and his third skill is also very strong. Attacks all enemies, places a shield buff equal to 30% max HP on this champion for 2 turns. Damage increases according to this champion's current HP. So Doomscreech is an HP scaling champion. You'll see he does have a fairly high base HP. So if you actually gear this guy properly, you can get the shield buff to be really beefy, especially considering that it scales based off of his maximum HP. So yes, it has a 6-turn cooldown, which is pretty long, but you can lower this down to a 5-turn cooldown. And considering that he also has another really good skill along with him, overall his skill kit is not too bad. For a Void Rare, this guy absolutely going to be worth considering taking to level 60, and probably not really a Void Rare champion that you hear too much about. He does have this increases ally HP and faction trips by 21% as well. So that's going to be number 1 on the list. Now moving on to number 2, another champion that I really have not talked about too much. This is going to be in the Lizardmen, and we are going to talk about Horrorspecs. Now, Horrorspecs is very interesting. I actually really like this guy, and he reminds me of another champion. He has a very good skill, but his auto attack is also pretty decent. So his auto attack right here attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 15% chance of placing a 2.5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So at first glance, this doesn't seem that good because it's only 15%, but the skill books are going to make a huge difference for this skill. It is a rare champion, which means booking this guy should not be too difficult in comparison to epics and legendaries. You can get an additional 20% buff debuff chance, bringing that all the way up from 15% to 35%. And considering that it's on each hit, he does attack twice, so it's going to be close to a 75% chance, or 70%, sorry, of placing that poison debuff. Yes, it's only the weaker poison, which is a bit unfortunate, but to have a decent poison on an auto attack is always a good thing. So pretty decent auto attack right there. Then you move on to his second skill, and this is another very strong skill. Fills the turn meters of all allies by 15%, places a 15% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. So 5-turn cooldown can be lowered down to a 3-turn cooldown with skill books, and this skill is very similar to Apothecary's skill. So if we go to High Elves, you guys will see Apothecary, of course, one of the most well-known champions in the game. He's not a Void champion, though, so we're not really going to talk about him much in the video today, but I just wanted to compare that skill to Apothecary's Boon of Speed. Very similar, but it's a little bit weaker. Places a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns, fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%. So also 5 turns can be lowered down to a 3-turn cooldown. So Horrorspecs has a very similar skill, except the difference is that it is only a 15% buff right there. Besides that, it functions exactly the same. And of course, Horrorspecs is going to be more of an offensive-based champion because he has that poison auto attack, whereas Apothecary is going to be more defensive because he has his heals instead. So, you know, you kind of have two champions that have that similar buff, but with two different goals, where Horrorspecs is probably going to be more used in, you know, like the clan boss or something similar to that. Then his third ability revives a dead ally with 30% HP and fills their turn meter by 30%. 6 turn down to a 5-turn cooldown right there, and to top it off, he has his increases ally speed in the arena by 15%. So, you know, not the absolute best champion in the game, of course, not even for a rare, which is why we're talking about him first. Remember, the list today is in reverse order, so these are kind of towards the bottom of my top 10 list for void rares, but definitely a champion still worth considering taking to level 60, and a champion that I know I have not really talked about before. Now moving on to number 3, we're going to go to the Barbarians. I know I've talked about this guy before, but I've changed my opinions on him a little bit. I still think he's a pretty solid void rare, but I don't think he's as good as the last time that I talked about him, which is why he's going to be, you know, around the number 7 point in my list. And that's going to be Ragemonger. Still a very solid DPS, damage dealing, void rare type champion, but, you know, he's not absolutely amazing or anything too crazy. So his first skill right here, attacks when enemy places a 7.5 continuous heal buff on this champion for 1 turn. If the hit is critical, it's nice that the auto attack does have that additional support with that continuous heal. Sure, it's only the weaker version of it, but still, it's better than nothing. His second skill attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 2.5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So you do have that AoE with the poison as well for 2 turns. And his third skill has an HP burn. Attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns. Of course, you can increase the chance with skill books right there. His aura increases ally attack in the campaign battles. And the last time I talked about this guy, I think I valued him a little bit too highly. Sure, he's decent. He has an HP burn and he has a poison, even though it's the weaker version on his skill kit. But overall, I would say, to wrap this guy up, he's a decent damage dealer. He's decent for the clan boss because he does have that HP burn and a poison on the same skill kit. Not really too many champions have that. Juliana, of course, being an epic that does, but she's got a lot of other good things that make her really good. So, you know, there's not anything super exceptional about this guy besides that, but if you don't have a somewhat solid DPS, poisoner, HP burn type champion for clan boss, this guy is definitely a decent consideration to make. Now moving on to the next champion on the list, we're going to go to the Undead Horde for this one, and it's going to be Seducer. Now, let's see here. Where is he? Seducer. Here he is. Alright, so I might have talked about this guy once or twice before. He's okay, he's decent. He's kind of in the middle of the road on my list right here. Attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a sleep debuff for 1 turn. Damage based on defense, so one of the good things about this guy is he is a defensive-based champion. Attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing a 25% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. Now, one of the things that I will mention about this guy, which kind of makes him a little bit lower on my list compared to where I would want him to be, is that his buffs and debuffs are going to be the weaker version of it. So as you can see, yes, you can boost the buff debuff chance to 100%, but it's still only the 25% decrease attack version instead of the 50% one. Then you have this one right here, places a 30% increased defense buff in comparison, of course, to the 60% one, which would be the stronger version on all allies for 2 turns, and a block debuffs buff on all allies for 2 turns. Now, that block debuffs is very, very strong. That's definitely going to make him quite good, but, you know, the fact that it's only 30% increased defense, a little bit unfortunate. I can definitely see, though, that if it was the stronger version, maybe this guy would be a little bit too good for a rare champion. Places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies for 2 turns. Places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn, only available when Temptress is on the same team. And his aura increases ally HP in all battles by 25%. Not a bad aura, a little bit strange considering he's a defensive-based champion to have this HP aura, but overall, you know, he's a very solid rare champion, very middle of the road. I would say still definitely going to be worth considering taking to level 60 if you don't have any kind of buffers, debuffers, or anything like this, but he's not going to be at the absolute tip top in comparison to some other champions. Now moving on to the Dark Elves. And I don't know if I've actually talked about this champion, Painkeeper. Painkeeper is a very unique void rare, and the fact that she has one very powerful skill in particular, but she's going to be very situational because of this. Attacks one enemy 2 times, fills the champion's turn meter by 10%. Already a decent auto attack right off the bat though, so that's definitely pretty cool. Damage based off of defense and attack as well, so that's something to keep note of. Her second ability attacks all enemies, then heals all allies by 15% of this champion's max HP. And her third skill, this is the one that's really crazy, very cool skill, I love it. It is situational, and it does have a long cooldown, but of course you can lower this cooldown 3 turns with skill books. And because she is a rare, hopefully it shouldn't be too difficult in order to skill book her. So decreases the cooldowns of all ally skills by 1 turn. 7 turn, which you can lower all the way down to a 4 turn cooldown. So this is kind of going to be the defining skill that makes Painkeeper a very unique champion. Her other skills are not too bad though, especially considering this fills the turn meter. And this has a heal and it's an AoE as well. And her aura increases ally HP and faction crypts by 21%. So depending on your team, your formation, what champions you have, if you use this skill properly, combat tactics can definitely be a game changer, but you know, it's something that you're going to have to plan a bit individually based on your team and what applications you're going to be able to put that skill to use right there. Now moving on to the next champion, we're going to go to the dwarves and talk about a very solid void dwarf here, and that is going to be Bulwark. Now Bulwark is a very good defensive void rare. His first skill right here attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 15% chance of placing a 15% weaken debuff for 2 turns. You can increase this, as you can see, quite a bit with skill books, all the way up to a 30% chance. So you're looking at 60% to place that weaken with the fact that it attacks twice. It is going to be based off of defense. This guy is going to be a defense-based champion, and having a weaken on the auto attack is probably going to be one of the strongest debuffs that you can have on an auto attack. A bit unfortunate that it's the weaker version, but still having that on the auto attack is very strong. Second ability right here, attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns, which you can actually boost up to 100%, lower the cooldown down to 3 turns, and his passive, which is going to make him quite strong, punishing defenses when attacked, has a 30% chance of extending the duration of all debuffs on the attacker by 1 turn. And those of you guys who are in the mid and late game, you know how powerful debuff extenders can be, especially for things like the clan boss. Very, very strong. Any kind of debuff extending abilities that you have on any champions are going to be very, very valuable. And his aura increases ally defense in all battles by 17%. So overall, for a void rare defensive champion, he's going to be pretty strong. Definitely a decent champion to be worth considering taking to level 60. Now moving on to the demon spawn, we're going to talk about Felhounds. Now Felhound is a very strong champion that I feel like is a little bit underrated. I still haven't had the opportunity to really fully experiment with this guy, but he has some crazy applications. One of those being that he is a very strong campaign farmer if you can end up getting the right gear for him. He does have an area of effect auto attack, attacks all enemies, has a 25% chance of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Very strong. It's based off of defense and attack. Second ability places a 7.5 continuous heal buff and a 15% reflect damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. Now this is going to be super strong for the Fire Knight's Castle. As you can see, you can lower this down from a 4 turn to a 2 turn cooldown, and the fact that it's an area of effect, reflect damage, very insane ability specifically for the Fire Knight's Castle. Then he has his third ability, places a block damage buff on an ally for 1 turn. Probably the weakest of his abilities, but still, hey, it's something right there. 3 turn cooldown with skill books. And his aura increases ally defense and faction crypts by 19%. So this guy, his 2 main uses are, if you gear him up properly, he can be a fantastic campaign farmer. Actually, I believe technically the best one in the game, even a second or so faster than Bellower because of his attack animation. And his second skill makes him absolutely insane for the Fire Knight's Castle as well. So overall, a very, very strong defensive void rare. Now moving on to the High Elves, we have, of course, now we're getting into some of the most well-known void rare champions that are going to be super good and absolutely worth taking to 6 stars. Reliquary Tender, First skill right here, attacks with enemy has a 20% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff. As you can see, you could buff that up quite a bit with skill books right there, so having a decreased attack debuff on an auto attack is never bad. Her second ability, this is going to be the reason why she is so insanely powerful, removes all debuffs from all allies, then places a 15% continuous heal buff on them for 2 turns. With a 3-turn cooldown, this is just quite simply going to be one of the best abilities that you can find on a rare champion. It is super powerful, and it's going to be what makes Reliquary Tender such an insane rare champion. And finally, revives an ally with 30% HP and fills their turn meter by 30%. 6-turn cooldown, which can be lowered to 5 turns. Very strong Void Rare champion. Absolutely going to be a decent consideration to take to level 60. Now we're moving on to the 2 probably most well-known Void Rares in the game. We're going to go to Ochre and Tribes for this one. Actually, I just pulled this guy. Super happy about it. Those of you guys who watched the summons from the other day, I don't want to spoil too much, but I did finally get a Bellower. I've been playing since April, and I finally have this guy, so time to put him to work. He's going to be probably what is known as the best campaign farmer in the game because all of his abilities are area of effect. They all have a little extra something on them as well. Attacks all enemies has a 20% chance of placing a block cooldown skill. Attacks all enemies has a 50% chance of placing a decreased speed debuff, and attacks all enemies has a 75% chance of placing a decreased attack and a 75% chance of placing a decreased defense. It is the weaker version. You can boost it up to 100% with skill books, but having all of this extra debuff and utility on a area of effect champion that's also a rare, this guy is quite simply just going to be one of the best Void Rares in the game because of how insane he is. He's got a lot of stuff to offer for what he can do. Increases ally speed in the faction curse by 15% for his aura as well. And finally, of course, what is going to be known as the most, probably the most powerful rare champion in the game overall for Void Rare, for any rare. Just one of the best champions, period. Even in comparison to epics and legendaries, that is going to be Coldfire. Attacks 4 times at random. Each hit has a 25% chance of placing a 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. So you've got an auto attack that attacks 4 times, which is going to be super good for Giant Slayer. Second ability, attacks all enemies, has a 30% chance of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 1 turn, places a 5% poison for 2 turns if they're under a heal reduction, and of course her third ability, which is going to be her most powerful one. This scales off of enemy max HP, which is insane once you get to mid and late game content where you're fighting things that have a ton of HP. This thing can hit easily well over 1,000,000. Attacks on enemy, decreases the target's turn meter by 100%, has an extra 30% chance of inflicting a critical hit. Damage increases according to max HP. 5-turn cooldown, which can be lowered to 4 turns, and overall, Coldfire is just quite simply going to be known as one of the best rare champions, one of the best champions, period, in the game, and she is fantastic. So, with that all being said, that's my top 10 list for Void Rares. All decent champions worth considering taking to level 60. I did this in reverse order, so the champions I ended with are probably going to be better than the champions that I started with, but hopefully you guys found some new champions that you might not have heard of in this list. So, as I always say when it comes to these lists as well, I'm sure there are certain champions that I've missed out on that are also decent. I know there are, just off the top of my head, at least a couple, but, you know, I wanted to try to fit in 10 in this video, and as you guys can see, we're almost at 20 minutes, so I'm going to leave it here. Maybe for part 2, we'll talk about epics because we have all this crazy stuff going on with the Void event, but for now, that's going to be it for the video today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed, and if you did enjoy this video and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. Really appreciate all the support, everyone. Feel free to toss a quick like. It helps out more than you can imagine, and more Raid Shadow Legends videos, guides, tutorials, and all that fun stuff should be popping up on the screen right about now. Have a fantastic day, and until next time, this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.